Welcome, everyone. Today we are looking at the wonderfully creative and much loved Marionette Society. This society stirs up fond memories for all who participated or watched the sellout shows of the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. But the Marionettes was about so much more than puppetry. The society brought together arts and crafts, music, acting, writing, including satire, in a way that no other spectacle could. We've had more members of the Radley community get in touch about this topic than any other, so this should be a fabulous discussion. Before we move on, just a few housekeeping items for you. Please keep your microphones on mute, except if you're contributing, just to avoid any disturbance on the call. This is an interactive session, so we do want to hear your thoughts and memories, so please do feel free to share. There's a chat function at the bottom of your screen, and we will also keep an eye, if you want to stick your hand up, if you have your camera on, we will keep an eye out for you as well there. And just to say, this event is recorded, so it will be made publicly available for those who can't join us today. Now, I am absolutely delighted to be able to introduce our speakers. As usual, the incredibly knowledgeable Claire Sargent, our College Archivist, is on the call and will be leading the discussion. And I'm hoping, although I can't see him, that we are also joined by Hamish Aird, who retired Radley Don, to add his thoughts and memories. Over to you, Claire.
Hello, it's very nice to be talking about the Marionettes, and thank you, Sophie, for the introduction. The Marionettes go right the way back. We've got a 40 or 50-year history to talk about here. But what I'm really relying on is that rather than me just going through a sort of chronological list of performances, is that you will all chip in. We've had a lot of memories that have already come through, and some of those I've added in to the discussion. And if one of those is you, then please chip in and tell us a little bit more about that memory. I'm going to share the screen. So we're going to have what photos we have and a few little pictures and so on. So the Marionettes. I've got in front of me the logbook of the Marionette Society. Now, my first request is that I've got the logbook for 1940 to 1950. I've then got the logbook. Let me get it out. The logbook from 72 to 79. And the one in between. So somebody out there has got Radley College Marionette Society logbook for 1951 to 1972. If you've got it tucked away, it would be really good for it to come back. What I also do have is a wonderful thing, which is 65 to 81, and that is the full list of members. So that basically is everyone who was a member in those years with a full list of exactly what part they played in each of the Marionette productions. So there's no hiding. This is all here and can all be made available. That's not a threat, by the way. Where we start is back in 1941 and 42 with The Sword in the Stone by T.H. White. And these are the photographs from the logbook. And the logbook starts off with the history, which they reconstructed with a little note that says before July 1941. So if you're sitting comfortably, I'm going to read the story. One bleak Sunday in November 1940, Herr Brann, a man of international fame as regards his world-famous marionette show, which Radley College has on many occasions been privileged to see, gave a lecture with lantern slides, as well as with some of the actual dolls in the Science Lecture Theatre. This lecture was only for those boys who were interested. Needless to say, this is 1940, Eastbourne College were already here, evacuated, and Eastbourne had already seen him. So the Eastbourne Marionette Theatre members turned up, but it appeared that very few of Radley's senior boys were interested enough to come, although quite a few juniors were present. The lecture itself proved interesting, although the patience of a few was tried by the fact that Harebrand's actual speech was a trifle hard to follow. Practical knowledge was gained by all when his son explained at great length the intricate works of a puppet and parts of dolls, incomplete and finished, were passed around. The lecture finished with the showing of some coloured lantern slides of actual scenes in some of Harebrand's most well-known shows. By this lecture, it was hoped to arouse enough enthusiasm amongst the Radley boys to form their own society of theatre, which, thanks to great help given by R.R. Simpson, Esquire, the Eastbourne art master, was at length formed. Now, Harebrand was the Munich puppet master. He and his theatre troupe had left Munich in 1934 with the rise of Nazism, I assume. And they came actually in 1938 and gave a performance of a nativity at Radley, which impressed by its sheer beauty and power. And the Radleyans sat down and said, what are we going to do? How are we going to do this? Eastbourne say, we're here already. They already had a puppet theatre. There are one or two other schools which had started marionette societies. And at Radley, the whole thing had to be worked out. You needed to find the puppets, you needed to find the costumes, how to operate them, a place to operate them, the theatre, music, everything. And the very first thing they decided to do was to adapt a fairly recent novel, T.H. White's The Sword in the Stone. Why is my screen black? And you can see here we've got the puppet of King Pellinore, and many of you will recognize already the style of Radley puppets. The Sword in the Stone was adapted by Brian Worthington, who I was told only this morning was still very active and very keen on puppets and model making, well into old age. A colleague of mine is actually a relation and knew him, and went across to see him frequently, and he had a garage which was still full of puppets. His daughter also became a modeler and is now a costume designer. So you can see the link we're already getting, that the marionettes is an all-consuming career creating topic. So they started with the Sword in the Stone. They started with this wonderful creature here, who is apparently modeled on Disney's Pluto and became the questing hound for Sir Grummer Grummerson. And I'd love to know what wall in Radley they're actually performing off here. And quite now, health and safety now suggests that boys are not encouraged to hang over the front of balconies with creatures on strings. But obviously in 1940, there were. By 1946, they had embarked on some really extravagant pieces. The Marionette Society remains the only society or area of Radley College which has performed the whole of Mozart's Magic Flute with full cast and orchestra. Nowhere else do we do such wonderful things. And what I really liked here was this, that you can see in this photograph, how the scene is held up with all of these bits of wood and so on. So we started very early on with the Magic Flute. Soon after this, Chris Ellis arrived as art master and threw himself into helping with backdrops. And you can see a little bit of that again, still on the Magic Flute, with the figure playing the bagpipes, books, all sorts of bits of prop which are just there And then one of the key characters is David Bass. Now, I know that Nick Haddon, I think, is on the call here and was going to, and remembered actually meeting Nick Bass, who was here with his father, Richard Haddon, who was also part of the early crew. And David is top at the back. I don't know whether that's actually visible. Sophie, is that visible to people? But on my screen, it's behind everybody's images. So
I think just about.
Yeah, so he's just about there. And the thing about David Bass was that already it's called an outstanding performance. Clearly the work of a highly accomplished performer. And he was the first of the Radleyians who went on into a professional career as a puppeteer. So that later on he turns up, coming back to Radley to advise on the Marionette Society, to give demonstrations of his own puppet show. It's charmingly made up by Mr. Ellis and beautifully dressed by Miss, I assume her name is pronounced Kirridge. I don't know if anybody remembers her and knows it. Miss Kirridge, wonderfully, was the catering manager for Radley at this period in the 1940s. And she had actually been the understudy on stage for Vivian Leigh on the West End. So you can imagine what she was like as a singer and an actress and so on. And I would imagine fairly glamorous person to have around the school. But already what you're seeing is this collaboration. This society is boys, the women on the staff, the teachers of the staff. Everybody is getting together to be part of this society. And one of the objections, actually, which came from RCADS, the Amateur Dramatic Society, was that women and girls were allowed to take part in the marionettes, whereas for RCADS, all the parts were taken by boys, all the female parts were taken by boys. But this was a much more open thing. They moved on then to Hansel and Gretel by Humperdinck. And this was actually designed to move outside of Radley. The idea was that they took it into Oxford and was starting to show puppets for children, so that anything can run. But what they do insist on, as it said, they're trying to produce a puppet show, not merely a show performed by puppets. And I love the sense that the marionettes have been given parts which are beyond their capabilities. You've got to actually realize there are limitations to what the marionettes can do, but there's not. Probably you can do huge amounts more than we would imagine. And then we've got Tony Heath's memory of the Beggar's Opera. And actually, I do have the program for that particular 1954 version of it. So we've got Chris Ellis as president, vice president, musical director, S. Lester, J. Blair, Jowers, Heath, Hale, Penfold, stage manager, M.H. Cook, house manager, C.R. Martin, mistress of the wardrobe, Mrs. Porter, assistants, Mrs. Rickards, Miss Legg, Mrs. Ashcroft, Miss Ball, Miss Helyard, head makers, people who are making heads, Dr. Drysdale, Stubbs, the hand maker, the person who's making the hands, is Wren, the property men, Kempton, Barlow, Winterton, the wig and the hat maker, Mrs. Cairns, the designer of the proscenium, Hardy, the box office manager, Humphrey, the caterers, who are Charlene, Millis, and Aylmer, sound engineers, puppet makers, operators, and an orchestra, which includes Field, Misen, Blower, Mrs. Stewart on the violin, Mrs. Blofeld, Gowers, Latham, P.D. Stewart, Esquire, on the flute, Miss Armstrong and Miss Rowlands. So already by 1954, this is 12 years on, it's become a really big thing. And you can see the kind of descriptions that it's getting. The effect is more valid than a live performance. It's strange how the scale doesn't bother people. They're actually looking right at like it's a peep show into the 18th century. So we come to the moment where instead of producing what are quite extravagant and classical pieces, John Gay's Beggar's Opera, Humperdinck's Hansel and Gretel, Mozart's Magic Flute, we reach the point where they start to write their own pieces. And Black and White Blues was the one with words and script by Peter Cook, music composed by Michael Bawtry. And I have been sent a recording on disc, which today has gone away for digitization, where Liz Arkle has sent us her sister Diana's copy of Black and White Blues. And I know there are quite a few copies of the records out there, which come up every so often. And certainly when I was last talking with the Llewellyn-Jones sisters, with Liz and Diana, back at the opening of the new chapel extension last year, they were still quite happy to sit around and sing I Could Live on Love for anyone who was prepared to listen. I would also say the first time I met Michael Bawtry, also he stood in the library and did me an entire song and dance routine from one of the Marionette shows. I also like this rumor that there might have been 4 separate scripts, but that nobody who mattered was actually offended by Black and White Blues. Unfortunately, now people might be a little more offended. And so one of the things I'm having to consider is how much we actually make available online once it's digitized. Michael Bawtry has given permission for it to be made available. Then we've got people who are being invited in to come and see it. So we have the Yeoman of the Guard and this lovely Lady Florrie, or later Lady Florrie, planning to come in a tiara. Fortunately, she didn't. And this wonderful description of Robin Grist's actual dancing, making his marionette dance like Fred Astaire with virtuosity and grace. I think Robin is on the call, or was going to be on the call today, but he's been writing also about his experience. The next piece of totally original work is Monday at Mandolino's. And one of the things about this is that it took a long time to write, so that by the time it was actually produced, I think certainly the principal composers and writers had actually already left school by the time that Monday at Mandolino's was shown. And we had a little note from Charles Commins saying that actually this is the copy of my copy of the record. I don't know where the record is. I can tell you where the record is because the record is inside the sleeve. So it's here. So I don't know how we've come to have Charles Commins's copy, but we do. And I don't think I have another. But this is available and you can hear it online. So I'm going to actually, hopefully, play us a little bit of Monday at Mandolino's. And it would be lovely if anybody who's had any ideas or memories stirred as I've been talking would like to just comment on something. Once we finish this, it would be really good to hear.
Not playing for me, Claire.
I know, it's not playing for me either. How's that?
Yep.
Every 3-inch headline will spell my success when my night by special goes to press. When the Count of Monte Cristo is arrested in a bistro for strolling around Versailles without his trews. That's news, haha. Or an eye-to-eye signorina, a Sophia or a Gina, sees too much of Mr. X and Mrs. Suze. That's news. Every Covent Garden cutie who is noted for her beauty and attention to her duty makes news.
His Night by Special goes to press tonight in black and white for our delight. His Night by Special is on the way. Make sure of our copy by ordering today. Every teenage headline will spell in success when his Night by Special goes to press.
Yeah.
Long time ago when we were nippers, we went to sea on ocean clippers. Hauled down the sails in the summer gales, when old man C saw his chance to rip her. Old man C, old man C. When we feel you starting beneath our feet, you bring back memories of the 7 seas, when the nights were warm and our youth was sweet.
Okay, when the nights were young and the youth was sweet. And you can listen to that on the digital archive for Radley College in full. So you've got the link there. The next piece, which was an original piece, was actually written by Richard Wilson. But we move on into the 1960s. And this is the period where it always seems a little bit odd that if I talk to contemporary boys about having an entire show about puppets, but actually one of the things to remember, I think, is that this was the era of super marionation. This was Fireball XL5 and Stingray and Thunderbirds, Captain Scarlet, great names which everybody remembers. And we did have, I've lost the piece of paper which had the name on it, Peter Dinnerly, who was G-Social, 1935. When Sophie was researching the last Old Radleyan, she talked to a lot of people who've been involved in drama or in theatre productions and so on. And Peter Dinnerly, who went on to a career as an actor, was actually the voice of Jeff Tracy and did that wonderful countdown at the beginning of Thunderbirds, the 5, 4, 3. I'm not even going to try it. But a very familiar voice, and that was Peter Dinnerly. So what you've got is television, which is actually based around these very sophisticated puppet shows. You've got very sophisticated characterization. I know that Thunderbirds were all based, I think Scott Tracy was based on Sean Connery, so that you could recognize who they are. You've got quite elaborate, quite enthralling stories. You could tell that I was a real fan of Thunderbirds. And actually talking very much, this was supposedly life in the 21st century, but done there through puppetry. And here's Radley, who are actually involved in this and making their own films and stories. So we've got Mark Holford, who has told us about his time as secretary with the Mikado, the Mystery of the Red Barn. So going back into a little bit of Gilbert Sullivan and a bit of Victorian melodrama. And I'd really like it confirmed whether they really did have the longest marionette strings in Europe. Mark, you're there. I can see you. You're going to tell us?
I am. I had no idea where this tidbit of information came from, but I do remember us thinking, sort of believing it. The only other thing I remembered since, and I can't remember which, we had a collapsing organ. I remember building that out of various bits and pieces. I'm not sure whether that was in the Mikado or the Red Barn. I think it might have been in the Mikado. And I remember some of the heads.
So was it supposed to collapse, or was that part of the?
No, it was meant to collapse, and it was meant to come back up again too. So the pipes sort of collapsed forward, and then they were all on strings, and they came back up. It's quite fun.
Right. So the organ itself is a marionette.
Well, sort of, I suppose. Yes. I mean, it was in a box with it looked like an organ, but as part of the joke, the whole thing collapsed. That's about all I can remember. I'm hopeless at the past. That's my problem. Otherwise, and I don't think I've got any photographs either, unfortunately. I will look at some point, but they're quite hard to.
Well, the gaps that you'll have been noticing is where we don't have photographs. So Richard Wilson was talking about his production in the 1960s, and I've got no photographs of that. I've got no photographs of Mondays at Mandolino's. All we have is that sketch, which was part of came from the Radleyan, and I presume is part of the program design, but I haven't got that. And that is that gap that we've got in the logbooks, where we just don't have the records. So we've got the Mikado and the longest strings, and then we come on to Toad. Now, what I loved with Toad, as clearly demonstrated here by the climbing team, is this use of the mansion as a prop itself. So that's become the backdrop. And Toad, once it started to be discussed, it was always called Toad, never Toad of Toad Hall or anything else. I actually put Toad Hall down originally, thinking that Toad was just a shorthand. But actually looking into the logbook, it is just Toad. But what came through there that was quite fun was the memory of how the animal characters were actually based on. So we've got Goldsmith as the Stoat, Stoat and Harris. Oh no, Goldsmith is Toad. You can see that. You could see that he would be. Stoat and Harris is the Stoat. Burks as the Badger with an OR tie. And how the Badger was actually eventually given to Diana Burks to have in her doll collection. So that again would be something it would be lovely to know if that is still treasured in Diana Burks's collection, tucked away in a corner. But I like this idea that actually what we're using is beginning to caricature dons. It's all very memorable. And here we've got Ratty, Toad, and Mole. I don't know. There was no record of who Ratty or Mole was based on. I don't know if we've got anybody on the call who was part of that Toad production who does remember. Alex, you looking like you might? No?
No, I was in the 1970s, but I think we repeated it sometime in the 1970s.
I think you did. I think I've got some photos from the later production, but I think it is a reprise. How much was the script taken from Toad and Toad Hall, and how much was it a new script? Do you remember?
No, I don't. I'm afraid. We just presented, and Hugo Langrish would just sort of it would have been there.
Yeah,
I think it was a new script, Nicholas.
Yeah, you think so, Nicholas?
Yeah.
Well, we're coming to Potted Lobster, which you would have been part of. Are you part of that, Nicholas? Yeah. And that is described as underwater.
It's quite funny because I've just looked out. So I found an old script, and apparently I must have been lifting up the whale up and down at some stage. Because it's in big letters, up, down.
Well, the description of it was that only the head, as we can see here, was too big to go anywhere on stage. Just the head.
Yeah. It must have been the jaw then. I must have been operating the jaw.
But Potted Lobster seemed to get quite a lot of memories going from people as well. And now Hugo Langrish. who I'm sure very many of you will remember. I did talk to Hugo's son a few weeks ago and said how good it would be if Hugo could be on the call today, but he's not able to join us at all. But we do have his collection of photographs that he gave. So a lot of these, some of these are Nicholas's photographs that you sent.
Well, I've managed to put a backdrop of the estate agents where I'm sitting here. You can customize your backdrop. So
so that's where you are. So we can all see the estate agent very clearly for the ghosts of Berkeley Square. And there he is.
And I recognize that's my writing, funnily enough, on that left-hand side.
On that.
Yeah.
Well, these are from the minute book. So
Yes.
as a secretary.
Yes.
Hamish, hello. Are you?
Yeah, I've got a picture from the Radleyan of the toad. I wrote the review of it. Don't know whether whether you can see it or not. Probably not.
The Radleyan is available online as well. So if people want to go back, you can read all the reviews.
There it is at the bottom. It's a sort of It's a caravan.
Mm-hmm.
It. Can you hear me?
Yes.
And that's a picture of from Toad of the Toad.
The caravan at from Toad.
Yeah,
yes.
some of the characters in it. Anthony Shelley, of course, whose father was an actor. Norman Shelley did all sorts of comedy stuff. And who else was there? Was Goldsmith. That's J.L. Goldsmith, the elder Goldsmith. David Taylor was very involved in it. I can't remember whether you mentioned him or not.
No, I haven't yet. No.
But and it's a very upbeat review. In fact, it was extraordinary the way that Classroom 14 suddenly changed into almost overnight into this theatre, with raked seating and so on. And I was in a classroom just further down in the slums, and Richard Morgan was in the room 14 at that time, as it was. So room 14 became the home of the Marionettes, certainly in my time, which is, of course, the later years, 68, 69, 70, 71, the final days. Yep.
Hamish, Jeremy Birchall here. Hello.
Hello, yes.
Hello. I remember Classroom 14 in my very first week at Radley, being taught to by Richard Morgan. I think that was his class. But I just wonder what happened to room 14 when these productions were going. Did they just close it down and move it somewhere else?
Well, I don't know. I think he just moved round. I mean, he was a pretty junior don at that stage. So I think he went where he was told or whatever. But
I think
it was only there for a matter of days. I suppose it's 3 or 4 days that it was taking place.
I mean, I think the back of the classroom was shut off, wasn't it? And that was the theatre, and that was used we used it all the time. The back, but there was a wall or something that got taken down.
Yeah.
Oh, right. I'd forgotten that.
I think I'm right in saying, if I remember.
That sounds like,
because we all beavered away in the back during the term time, so to speak, and on Saturdays, Sundays, whenever we did it. And then the wall got taken down for the actual performances, and I think if somebody said there were raked stairs, I think that's right, raked.
Yes, raked seating.
Yeah, seating.
Yeah.
Well, I did also come across a reference. I think I can't remember his name off the top of my head. There was a boy who died fairly young, and his father gave the wood for the theatre.
Right. Because the stage was permanently constructed. I mean,
Yeah.
as was the balcony to fall off, as you rightly pointed out. Not that
But it was rebuilt during my time.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
It was rebuilt during my time.
Oh, when was that?
Well, I think it was after Toad, the year following Toad. I'm sure they rebuilt the stage, and so that there was so that we could do Potted Lobster, there was a removable floor, which there hadn't been before.
I think we had a trapdoor on one. I can't remember.
Oh, really? Yeah.
We built a trapdoor for something, or there was a trapdoor. Not very big. I mean, about enough for one marionette body to go down or something.
But you guys who actually operated and did things in the production, I'm afraid I didn't, but I was very friendly with Hugo because he used to teach me the organ, and I've kept in touch with him too, as far as one can nowadays. I can't remember what I was going to say now, but I was going to say that Tony Shelley, who you mentioned earlier, he would have probably left about my time in 1971, so he probably wouldn't have done this show that's up on screen at the moment.
No, he didn't.
No, the question I was going to ask.
He would have done. We go back.
I'm sure Shelley did the voice for Toad.
I think he might well have done. He was absolutely cast for it, wasn't he?
Yes.
This is what it says in the Radley. This very excellent reviewer. The readers were good, better I thought than last year, with an exceptional performance by A.H.C. Shelley as Toad.
There you go.
The question I was going to ask earlier was Hugo was, as you know, very, very small, and I'm just wondering whether everybody that operated in the theatre had to be of his size to get in.
I was considerably taller than him, so I don't think so.
But was the average size small of everybody down there?
I don't remember that.
No, not that I remember. No.
Okay.
So we've got.
I think that Jonah, which was in 72, so towards the end of things, there were no longer puppets, string puppets. They were rod puppets for that.
Yes, I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, so there is a
flexible, not so much movement and so on. I wouldn't.
When did they become rod puppies?
Well, 72, I think.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Some of 72, Radley has a review of Jonah, which must have been one of the by someone called M.D. Holford. I think I've heard of him.
Who is he?
Well, I was sorry that there don't appear to be any photographs of Jonah, unless if I just plop through quickly, come back to it. Unless this is somebody rowing.
No.
I
don't
know what that is. So there were no images of Jonah at all, but it seemed to be very ambitious again to be producing one of the Townley plays as a marionette thing. So you're actually doing a mystery play there. Yep.
Yes, I mean, I don't remember the history behind it on that one, funnily enough. Right. I can remember more about Toad than the one I was involved in towards the end of my time.
Well, I just wonder whether Jonah came about because you already had a giant whale. Would that be a reason for doing Jonah?
I don't know. I can't tell you.
There was a scene in Jonah which was inside the whale, and the whale was sick, and we threw some plastic stuff out into the audience. So the whale was sick. I remember that.
Well, yeah, David, you were more involved with that, surely.
That's the main thing I remember, I have to say. I think there were rod puppets involved as well. I think we had a little area at the front, so it could be both marionettes and rod puppets, I think. So rod puppets towards the front of the stage and marionettes towards the back of the stage, I think. And there was a big cyclorama at the back. So the back, there was an area where people could push things up from the bottom side of the back, which I think was a permanent part of the theatre.
Yes, you're right. Yeah.
Right, so we've got the Ghosts of Berkeley Square we've been looking at, and Hugo Langrish, of course, a massive name in all of this. Nicholas Haddam, also, and your memory actually of meeting David Bass, so going all the way back to there, and now we're on 2 generations of marionettes because your father Richard was also involved with.
Yes, I mean he didn't talk too much about that. I mean, of course, you know, he was this fantastic actor, and it's funny, I don't remember him talking about the marionettes at all.
Well, I did come across a suggestion that somebody was trying to push the idea that you were either in the marionettes or you were in RCADS.
Yeah.
And you couldn't be in, you weren't allowed to be in both. So you kind of like you were a wet bob or a dry bob in marionettes or drama. But
I hadn't heard that one before.
No.
No, nor have I.
Right. So we can wipe that one out. That's good.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, of course, you didn't have to act particularly because it was the puppets that were doing the acting.
Yes, but we brought in, I mean, most of the voices were good actors, weren't they?
Yeah, that's true.
Well, we heard Monday at Mandolino's there, and the singers also are clearly good singers.
Yes.
This is Peter Dimitriadi. It wasn't true you couldn't be members of both because I was in Maria Martin and I was in Hamlet.
Right.
Maria Martin is in marionettes and Hamlet in the school play.
Yeah. So that clearly is
something. When was Maria Martin?
That was in 1966 or 7, Murder in the Red Barn.
Yeah.
Oh, that was right. Yes, of course. Yeah. So you and I must have done it together.
Probably. I was Maria Martin, if I remember correctly.
Oh, right.
As a young boy, I was with my first or second year. So it's 66 or 67.
Yeah.
I think we put a tableau up every Gaudet of Maria Martin. Was there a dungeon scene in it?
I can't remember, but I also think there was a trap door that somebody mentioned earlier. I can't remember.
That's me.
Yeah.
So we obviously have the same memory. That's good.
But in those days, there was a marionette theatre, which I haven't seen mentioned on this video, which was just outside the entrance to school. There was an actual properly designed marionette theatre.
Yes.
And people sat in the passageway and looked at it. It was by the exit towards a social quad.
Yes, that's it.
That's where the classroom had been. Yeah, that's where.
Yeah.
And the marionette, the theatre is, well, the gubbins was at the back of the thing, and at the front, sort of as you rightly say, where the entrance to the quad was a sort of cinema or theatre. What I want to say, sort of.
Well, there was a sort of village hall feel about the entrance, wasn't there, with a sort of glazed notice board, wasn't there?
I think you got into it through school, the back. Anyway.
Oh yes, at the back, yes. There was this door hidden within the panelling.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
So did you see the note from Simon Fisher about the rower, your mystery rower?
No, I didn't see that.
Said he's made in 67 or 68 for Gaudy Day by Simon, and
right.
and had a handle that parents and others could wind, and the sculler would row. So the mystery is solved on the rower.
So the mystery solved on the rower. So he's a Gaudy Day special for I presume for Henley.
That was for Jonah, I think, wasn't it?
This is Simon Fisher, and I can't remember what I was just trying to get a Radley rower in a boat, and he would indeed lean forward, the oars would go back, and in general, it worked. As long as people weren't too vigorous with the rotating handle.
And no, it wasn't. It was potted lobster that was on the Gawdy Day.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this one, Simon, you also did for Gawdy. I think Nicholas also had a memory of the marionettes being set up to run automatically, I would guess, on old Gawdy with the gramophone.
Yeah, we used old, in those days, we called them gramophones, record players.
Yeah, I just did a note in the chat about that. I remember there were various machines that made.
Yeah, they would just go round and round and round.
I think
must have used quite a bit of electricity.
That sounds a bit sophisticated.
Oh, yeah.
Bit like the window in Hamleys.
Well, let's see what we've got. I mean, we're talking about backstage. So here's this wonderful photograph. Again, I've no idea who this is, unidentified, from Hugo Langrish's collection. But I was intrigued also by this collection of a menagerie of animals, almost like a Noah's Ark. I don't know what they were. There's no mention of those. So new caricatured new heads modelled in clay, and details here from Peter about how they were made.
Oh yeah,
I remember doing that.
Yep.
There was a dreadful smell of fiberglass, I remember.
Very strong.
Great for glue sniffers.
There's a comment in the chat. Sounds terribly complex. Robert Ellis says, I was an operator involved with 3 productions, Maria Martin, Toad, and Potted Lobster. Can't recall much about the last one, but 2 of us had to operate the horse in Toad, which required much close cooperation and confusing crossing of arms.
Yes.
Yes.
It will have been. Well, I really liked this photograph of the Pirates of Penzance because it actually shows you how many strings there are. So you've got somebody here who's playing what appears to be a cello and a flute and a violin. There's a telescope, somebody dancing up on the table. And you can see
when was the Pirates of Penzance?
It's I'm assuming it's pirates. Maybe it's not.
That's before my time.
Yeah, me too.
It's in the Langrish collection.
When did Hugo become the Don in charge?
Oh, I'd have to look back through the books.
I think he arrived in Radley in 1959, so maybe fairly shortly after that.
Yeah, because he was in charge when I was there. I mean, he was the only Don involved, so to speak.
Right.
And I think I probably joined about 65. I mean, I went in 64, but I think I started.
It looks like 65.
But I don't remember the
he's down as president.
Yeah.
65. So maybe this is not actually pirates.
Well, looks like it, doesn't it?
It looks like it, but yeah. But this is one of the issues where that we have the photographs, but we don't have any dates or identification. So a lot of the time, I'm having to guess. So we try and sort it out. We've got tape recordings. I'm really looking forward. If Richard Wilson has got a tape recording, that would be really good. So hopefully he's hunting through his attic. And Tom Colville as recording. So were the songs recorded separately, or were they sung actually live?
I think they were recorded.
That's always the case.
I remember they were recorded. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I couldn't remember. I was trying to think about this, whether some of them were from professional recordings or whether we recorded them all, on tape ourselves. That I can't remember. I mean, the case of the Gilbert and Sullivan.
Yeah, well, certainly it looks like Tom Colville is saying here that Chapel Choir are actually recording, or some of the singers are recording.
Oh, there you
are. But we've got the backstage tapes there. This, I would have thought, must be trial by jury, but again, haven't got a.
Yeah, and it looks like a gaudy tableau,
right?
To me,
right. Well, that helps because those are something I don't have a list of. But again, when I'm trying to,
there's a bit of blanket at the bottom here. You see, blanking off the table or whatever.
Right. Then we've got the Mikado again. So one of the three little girls. And the question came up about Tiny, the Newfie, who comes up in an awful lot of people's memories. I can imagine that if you do go into a classroom where you've got a dog quite as big as him, you would know about it. So there he is.
Oh, it's Tiny, yeah.
Yeah. Tiny the Newfie. Yeah.
With Donald behind.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Peter, is that Peter Stewart?
Yes, that's Peter Stewart.
Probably, yes. Yeah, it's a team photograph of the orchestra. So, yep.
The embarrassing thing about Tiny was that Donald Payne had a sign on his door saying Donald Payne and Tiny. And boys like myself applying for a music scholarship would go in there to be interviewed and meet Donald Payne and Hugo Langrish. And get
yeah.
And so Simon has already talked to us about this. Good. This is the classic shot of everybody. Now, did it really look like that, or is this posed?
No, I think it looked like that.
Well, it got like
they all look pretty much as they're concentrating.
It did
on occasions. It got like that, yes.
And there wasn't much space because I think the space was not more than 8 feet long and about 3 feet wide. So I think they would have looked like that. Yes, I'm trying to see if I know anybody there.
Right. And again, Peter, I like this this yearning to be a puppet operator, but you have to wait till your third year before you can be promoted to the ranks of puppet operator. Yeah.
Oh. I didn't know that one.
There's a nice bit in the Radleyan about that. There's a chap was joined the society the previous day, the day before the 4 performances on Gordy. He turned up to offer his services if required. So he was given hasty instruction in oyster operation, managed fairly well in the circumstances. That still did not abate the shambles upstairs in the gallery, however. A starfish was dropped half off stage and half wrapped around the lobster pot. The anchor was lowered into place so fast that it hit the lobster and in true life circumstances would have rendered him unconscious. And the lobster ended up so firmly wedged in the lobster pot that we only just managed to get him out for the next performance.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, brilliant. Yeah. And the other thing actually I've just remembered is that when you went in, if you were facing the audience, on the left, up some steps, literally, ladder type steps, was a gallery where the sound operator operated. And I'm not sure whether he did the lights as well, but he had a little window from which he could see the stage.
Ah, yeah.
Well, the Marionettes has produced more award-winning people than any other society, pretty much. So if we go back to Anthony Walton, who was 1948, he designed the backdrops and costumes and so on. And I think mostly the backdrops for the Magic Flute, and he went on to win an Oscar for set design, the production design, for All That Jazz, and nominations for his work on Mary Poppins and Murder on the Orient Express.
Mm.
And then we've got Robert Morris of 1955, who became a professional stage lighting designer. And these are all people who learned their trade actually here in the Marionettes. And I know when Anthony Walton, who I think went on to marry Julie Andrews, when we had his obituary a couple of years back, he actually said it was Radley Marionettes that set me on my way. And it was people coming to see the Marionettes who encouraged me to go on into production design. So it's had a really profound impact on some people's careers.
Didn't Peter Cook take part in it at one point?
He did.
Yes, Peter Cook wrote Black and White Blues.
Oh, yeah.
So yes.
Is there anyone here today that knew Peter Cook? I didn't, sadly, but I think he's one of the funniest men ever.
No.
No,
I don't think Michael Bortry's on the call today.
So when did it close down, and what made? Oh, sorry.
I was to say this again is one that is not identified. So possibly again one of your tableaus, do you think?
Could be.
No,
not sure.
It closed down. The last production was 79 to 80, and I think what was happening was that each production took so much time and effort. By the time you'd made the designs, and people were finding that it was actually becoming harder and harder to do this kind of thing alongside of schoolwork. And this is the story of the 70s, very much across lots of things in the school. And then, of course, with something which requires such technical expertise, there wasn't a handover. So if you haven't got people who are being trained up right the way through from when they come in as juniors, you have to keep learning how to do it. And so I think by the time they got to 1980 and Hugo Langrish left around about that point, I think, it had just become unsustainable.
Yeah.
That's my interpretation of it. Hamish, would you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think that there was conflict with drama, but I think there was just too much going on in the school at the time, really, that some things had to give way, and I think the Marionettes, it was felt that they'd had their day, as it were.
Hamish, I think that's right. It's Simon England here. I was very involved in the productions in 78, 79, and probably in 80 when it stopped. And you know, they were great, but I think there was a lot of effort, and I think there were just fewer people interested in it. So it's been really interesting for me this evening seeing some of those pictures of some of the older productions, which were absolutely tremendous. And I think it just got to a stage where there were so many other competitive things, and certainly I did probably about 3 years of the Marionettes, and then I did a lot of the the main stage productions and lighting and sound on the main stage, and it just, that almost became competitive. So I think the amount of time, and then it just didn't have as many people who wanted to come and watch it. So I think it was just the end of an era, I think, in some ways at that point.
I'm sure that's right.
Yes, I think so. And at that point, is that the point also where we change a little bit with drama as well? I think drama.
Well, I think how the social plays were, there seemed to be a lot of social plays on that time too, and they took time as well.
Yeah, yes. And dare I say it, the Haddon Cup was pushed to the fore as well, really, wasn't it?
I think so.
Yeah, there was that. And if you think about it, each one of these productions was involving possibly 40 people, and some of them up to 70. And in a school of just over 400 at this point, that's 10% of a school involved in a marionette production. So it's really, really taking up an awful lot of people. And this I found was the review of The Beggar's Opera, which I thought would actually make a really good summary of it. Expensive in space, time, and money, but was certainly worth it. And in part because of that, normal number of actors is doubled. So many skills needed, so many artists. The whole company needs such careful handling and so much understanding and sympathy that here, if anywhere, is a society worth its keep. But I also wanted to finish with a lovely description from the Radleyan in 1960, where it says, the stage manager, clad in faded orange boiler suit and semi-collapsed opera hat, labeled with his rank, sits amid a jungle of Coke and milk bottles, doing his French prep. So
Nice.
that, I think, is where we need to finish. But please come back to us with questions. Are there any other questions we didn't pick up on the chat?
I think somebody said it'd be great if you could make the recording available.
The recording is available.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Will you send us the link or something?
Yes, we can do that.
Very good. Thank you.
So over to you, Sophie.
Well, thank you so much, Claire, and thank you, Hamish, and everyone else that has chipped in. It's been such a treat to hear all of your thoughts, and unusual to have this much interaction as well, so thank you. We will be returning in the early summer with the next Archives event, which will look at the numerous Olympians that Radley boasts among its alumni. And again, in the autumn, we will turn our attention to the Radley in the 1960s. So thank you all so much for joining us, and we will send a recording around. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
No, thank you very much.
Thank you
Thank you.
very much.
Bye, Hamish.
Very much. Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.